Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Thank you for joining Guide Technologies and our trusted partner, SourceDay. I'm Wendy Broom, Director of Marketing at Guide Technologies, and joining me today is SourceDay co-founder and Chief Strategy Officer, Clint McCree, and Senior Solution Consultant, Michael Maltner. We're thrilled to have you join us as we dive into how SourceDay can help you de-risk your supply chain. Over the next hour, we'll explore key insights and practical strategies that can help you optimize your supply chain and maximize your Infor CloudSuite Industrial investment. Whether you're actively seeking a supply chain management add-on for CloudSuite Industrial or simply interested in expanding your knowledge, this webinar is designed to provide you with actionable takeaways. Feel free to drop questions in the chat throughout the webinar, as we'll have a Q&A session following the presentation and live demo. Without further ado, I'll hand the floor over to SourceDay co-founder Clint McCree.
Thank you very much, Wendy. I appreciate it. And at the end of this presentation, we're going to have a quiz on who could pronounce Michael's last name the best. But I'll leave that to him to walk you guys through that. Thank you very much. So we're excited to be here. SourceDay has been in and around the Infor ecosystem for quite some time. A little bit of background on myself. I ran a manufacturing company in Austin for 10 years, and we were a SyteLine shop. So I've been using SyteLine since, I've been in the Infor ecosystem going over 20 years now. So after I left the manufacturing company, a lot of the problems and challenges that we were seeing and dealing with in supply chain, I started looking for solutions, and I didn't really find anything that hit the mark. And so we started SourceDay. And Tom Colley and I are the two co-founders of the company. We started, and we've been working in the Infor ecosystem ever since. So excited to be here with you. If you're familiar with SourceDay, we're going to share some new information with you today. If you're new to SourceDay, welcome, and looking forward to presenting to you. And educate you on what we do. If this is something not new and you are familiar with us, then we have some new things in the presentation and in the demo that Michael will be going through. So as Wendy mentioned, we're the two presenters today. I'm going to be going through some slides just to get you caught up on what we do, where we fit, and most importantly, what value do we bring to you. And then Michael's going to take that and move into a demonstration for the group. So excited to be here with you all today. So these are the agenda. So we're going to walk through supply chain risk. We'll talk some about supply chain optimization, what that looks like. ROI, right? Today, more and more people are wanting to really get the proof that there's the return on investment. We're going to talk to you about that. We're going to talk to you a little bit about what it looks like when your buyers and your suppliers are working together. And then the new stuff I've mentioned, we'll talk a bit about SourceDay Intelligence, and then we'll let Michael run with it on a demonstration and Q&A. If you have questions, we ask that you just throw it into the chat or the Q&A, whatever is easiest for you. And Wendy will monitor that and come back to us, and then we'll address those questions as we go. All right. So let's just talk about supply chain. One of the first questions I get, I've met many of you at trade shows and conferences, and one of the first questions I get, besides, hey, what do you guys do, is, what value do you bring, or what solutions do you solve for? And I always sort of pause that and I say, look, you would really be interested in talking to us if you are dealing with supply chain issues, like your suppliers are running late on their deliveries, or suppliers are not communicating with you, or you're just having trouble in all around the supplier world. Not necessarily with a quality of a product, but just, hey, I'm trying to get product in the door. I'm trying to hit my delivery dates. I'm trying to meet my mark on schedules. And we're also trying to, service our customers, and our suppliers are constantly getting in the way of that. And so this is what the areas of the business that we tackle with our solution. And if those are areas that are interesting to you, or areas that you feel like you want to address, we certainly believe it's worth a conversation to have with us. One of the things that sort of starts to this issue of suppliers running behind or being problematic is that in the world of purchase orders, which is what you're doing with your suppliers, 52% of your purchase orders are going to change. Now, we know that because as a multi-tenant cloud application, We have millions of purchase orders that flow in and out of our application all the time. And we are able to see this kind of information. So 52% of your purchase orders are going to change. That's not the scariest part. The scariest part is, of those 52%, the vast majority of you are going to manage those changes outside of SyteLine. So it's going to be in an email somewhere. It's going to be in a spreadsheet somewhere. It's going to be on somebody's voicemail. And somebody has to manually take that information and move it into SyteLine so that everybody has that visibility to it. Most organizations don't do that. Most organizations don't make those updates on a timely manner, and that sort of leaves the rest of the company blind. Companies that are dealing with late parts, right? So this is our very first video we ever did. We talked about that 1 penny part or that 5-cent part that's messing up $100,000 shipment. And how many of you have been in that boat where a supplier has missed something super simple and it's holding up your ability to generate revenue, your ability to service your customers? And what we see across the board is most companies are dealing with at least a 33% late part issues. The further downstream that you go, when purchase order information and you're not on the same page with your suppliers, we find that completely moves its way into other areas of the business like AP. You are not able to pay invoices timely, accurately, get access to those early payments if invoices are not matching the purchase orders. And there's a lot of, I don't have to tell you all, but there's a lot of behind the scenes that goes in trying to get all that shored up. So it's more than just a late part. It's the late part has this ripple effect throughout the entire organization that goes all the way to your customer. And as a former production guy, so I used to run the production facilities at our company, you need every part, right? It's not like in a software company where we can ship some software out and then we can catch up the software later. If you're building a bicycle, you have to have everything, including the seat. The problem is, as we've talked about, is a third of your parts will not arrive on time. And the biggest rub is the parts that are late today aren't necessarily the parts that are going to be late tomorrow. So it's almost like you're constantly chasing this issue. And when you don't have a process wrapped around that, when it's more manual, then you're exposing the company to uncertain risk that could impact things that we've already talked about. So when you optimize your supply chain with a solution like SourceDay, with your Infor ERP solution, you can start to expect changes in your efficiencies to run your business. We're so heavy, organizations are so quick to invest on the customer side. How do I get more customers, or how do I build something faster? And oftentimes what's overlooked is the investment that's needed on the supply chain side of the business. And look, let's face it, since COVID has happened, and all the supply chain issues we've had with that, supply chain now more than ever is being discussed in leadership meetings, and it's being discussed in boardrooms. And if you're not a part of those discussions, I encourage you to do that, because these are the areas of the business that companies are trying to solve for right now. And so when you look at a solution similar to SourceDay or SourceDay, these are the statistics that you can start to expect. 96% on time and full, meaning 96% of your parts deliver suppliers on time and full. Reduce 50% reduction in handling costs. Think about all the expedites and management and touch points and all the things that you're doing day in and day out just to get those parts. It's almost like you're heroing parts to get in the door. I certainly know when I was running our factory, that's exactly what our buyers are doing. Every Monday morning, we had a production meeting. We were talking about what we could get in and out the door. And prior to that meeting, our buyers would spend days prepping, working with suppliers, contacting them, getting the updates, loading them all into a spreadsheet so that we could have a conversation about that come Monday morning. All that stuff goes away when you put this automation and a process and a solution around this problem. And of course, we talked about the downstream. Imagine if your AP team, instead of having 25 or 30% matching invoices, what if they had 90% matching invoices? How much faster more efficient could your AP team be? Other factors that deliver value to the organization is when we talked about production stoppages. So you can have a 70% reduction in downtime, production stoppages. So, that was something that plagued me personally, and I'm sure has plagued you as well, is you're trying to schedule production. You're trying to get the tooling right. You're trying to get the right people who are trained to do it. You get everything on your end, everything that you can control inside your four walls is ready to go, and the part doesn't show up. So working more closely with your suppliers to overcome that is huge. Delivering delays to your customers. Again, these things are all connective tissue. Buffer stock. A lot of times we find organizations, because they're having this difficulty in working with their suppliers, they overcome those gaps by adding inventory. Let's don't run into that problem again. Let's buy more inventory. Let's stock it. Well, that's tying up working capital and money that you could be doing for other things. Talked about the AP side of efficiencies, and then of course OpEx and CapEx. So all these things are connective tissue. You don't generally think about how a supplier can impact all the aspects of your business, but they do. And if there's anything that we do in this presentation today is educate you on thinking about how important it is that suppliers really do what you're needing them to do. I mean, your ERP and everything that you're using to function, run your business is, banking on that information is correct, but also that those suppliers are going to do the right thing. And oftentimes that doesn't happen because there's very loose processes around that for most people. ROI. So when you're looking at a solution like SourceDay, and we've talked like now more than ever, and these numbers are just fictitious numbers here that we put up here, but we understand the importance of making sure that when you're looking at and evaluating a solution like SourceDay, that you can do the proper analysis to determine if this is something that's going to be valuable to you. I'm not going to stand up here and present to you and say everyone here would benefit from SourceDay. I'd say many of you probably will. I'm not going to say 100% will. So one of the things that you can do to do that is you can go to our website and sign up to use our ROI calculator. And we can actually work with you. Our team will work with you on running through this ROI calculator process to see if this is even something that you should entertain. Again, not a lot of companies have invested in the areas of supply chain. Many of you might be using the same processes for 10, 20, 30 years. And trust me, there's been a lot of movement and automation there. And one thing I'll just pause and say, just an example is, we all have smartphones. And so you can send money to your, my kids, ask me for money all the time, so I can use my Venmo application and send money directly to them through the Venmo application. But for most of you, you're going to send millions of dollars worth of purchase orders out this year and have no visibility into the status of those purchase orders. But yet I have ultimate status of that dollar or that $20 that I sent to my kid. I just realized I don't think my video's on. I don't know how to make it work. Anyways, if you're interested in doing the ROI, please, we're going to leave this up here on the screen for just 2-3 seconds here. Take a picture of this QR code, and that will take you to the direct link on our webpage where you can sign up to do your own ROI calculation on SourceDay to see if it's something that you even want to explore or entertain. All right. Not going to spend a lot of time on this slide. So this is where we're bringing the story together of sort of how we do it. We've talked about what we do and why we do it, and here is how we do it. And this is a world, and I'll let Michael go through this more. This is a world in which we're bringing all of your suppliers into one single experience. Now, your buyers might be, using email, or your suppliers might be using email, or your suppliers might be using a platform like SourceDay, or they might be using EDI. But for buyers and for your company, you have one process, and that's SourceDay. So everything's running through that. And so by doing that, we're giving you putting your arms around all your purchase orders, all your spend, so that you can begin to do things like SourceDay intelligence, which we're going to get to here in a few minutes. But I'll let Michael dive into that a little bit more. Other things that we do that you probably never thought were possible is, what if you could get your arms around your PO exceptions? I remember PO exceptions. I remember our report being like 800 pages long, and I thought there's no way we're ever going to be able to maintain this on a daily, weekly basis. But SourceDay has built intelligence into being able to bring in your purchase order exceptions right out of SyteLine, put them into an application that allows you to manage by exception. So if you have pull-ins, or down here you can see on the bottom right here, if you have move-ins or move-outs or cancellations, what if that was brought? What if you imagine a world where that comes into an application where you quickly can filter to that and then triage those right out to your suppliers instantly with a few clicks of a button? not having to analyze report, not having to type a bunch of spreadsheets together. It's all done for you inside the application. Supplier scorecards, another area that is important for many of you, especially if you're ISO. So those supplier scorecards are built into the application. Two things I'll say here. Supplier scorecards are important, but also getting the supplier scorecards to your suppliers is very important. So SourceDay does offer that ability for your suppliers to consume these on their own. So you're not having to wait for a QBR or an annual review or something like that. They can see how they're doing as it relates to the score. Okay, when you look at SourceDay and what we're doing, and it's kind of a multi-step process, right? We're bringing all your suppliers into a supplier network that Michael will get to here in a minute. Once you get them into the network, it allows us to set up these processes, these common processes that are, being able to use the same process solution to cover all of your spend, all of your suppliers. And then the third component of that is once we have your suppliers using the application, we have these repetitive processes and things like that in place, like purchase order acknowledgments. Then we're able to sprinkle in SourceDay intelligence, which allows us to do a lot more, where we can not only see the data, but we can actually start to inform you. We can predict what's going to happen. Maybe we can predict a lead time is going to be missed, or we can recommend, hey, based on what we're seeing here, we recommend you take this action. And the third step here is with that SourceDay intelligence, it allows us to automate some of the tasks that you're doing. So you can imagine in a world where you're not having to touch every single purchase order out there. And that's really what this is about. If you look at SourceDay intelligence impact, over here on the left is your current world. You've got a decent amount of purchase. Each of these pie charts here represents your world of purchase orders. And so a decent amount of purchase orders, 52%, require intervention. We already talked about that those require intervention. But the rest of your purchase orders, if you're not using an application to manage those, you're still having to touch. So the buyers are probably still cutting purchase orders, emailing them to suppliers, calling the supplier to get a follow-up. Even if the supplier accepts a purchase order just like it is, well, oftentimes it requires some manual intervention. When you flip over to the right here and you're a SourceDay customer, well, you can see a tremendous amount of that lift that's happening inside that purchase order world of managing purchase orders, managing those suppliers can be automated. So that's a big deal. Now, again, not saying we're going to automate everything. There's going to be those times, and SourceDay is going to tell you, hey, 25% of your purchase orders are going to be a problem. You probably need to pick up the phone and call the supplier. But the rest can be handled through an application, and many of those transactions can be automated, which Michael will go through. All right. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael. I don't know if my camera was working. I don't think it was. I apologize. I'm having some issues with Teams, but hopefully Michael can get his working, and I'll turn it over to him.
Perfect. Thanks, Clint. Share my screen here. All right. So I have 2 slides for us just to get started. And then after that, I'll dive in and take you through what it looks like for the buyers and suppliers both to use the SourceDay platform. First and foremost here, just want to set the stage for, hey, what's going on in ERP, what's going on in SourceDay, and where can my suppliers take action? And then we'll quickly review that slide that Clint had up for a moment with how do the suppliers interact and what optionality do we have for them, and how are we innovating on that to encourage the suppliers to use SourceDay? Because as we know, portals are great, things can really give us good information and insight if both parties use it. So we have to make sure that we are leveraging the suppliers and getting good information from them easily and in a way that makes sense for them. After those 2 slides, we'll jump in and then we'll walk through what it looks like to be a supplier and to be a buyer working within SourceDay, and how our SourceDay intelligence can really help de-risk your orders. So first and foremost, what you'll see here is everything kicks off with a PO that's been created in your ERP. So as you're creating that in SyteLine, whatever it may be, we will look to that ERP on a rolling cadence of 15 minutes to say, all right, are there any new POs that have been created or any changes made to existing POs? If SourceDay sees that, it's going to pick it up from the ERP and communicate it over to the suppliers. You'll also see, though, that the buyers have the same copy of that purchase order. And the reason for that is we want both parties working on the same information at all times. As soon as folks in their typical work process today click save and print to PDF and then send that PO out in an email, that information has immediately become stagnant and stale. If anybody touches it in ERP, the supplier may not be aware of that. So we want both parties on the same page to make sure that you get what you ordered when you ordered it. And the first thing we ask those suppliers to do is give us an acknowledgement. Seems like a simple thing, but really capturing acknowledgements can be really, really difficult. And then we even have some customers explain this as harassing people just to get that acknowledgement back. So we're going to take over that process, auto remind those suppliers, hey, you have outstanding orders. Please go in and acknowledge those. So that way you have visibility, and you can see we can put that back into the ERP. So the greater team that's not even using SourceDay, sales, production, whoever may not want to log into SourceDay, they can still see if the supplier has confirmed and acknowledged that order, thus de-risking it. One of our SyteLine customers immediately saw a jump to 86% in their acknowledgement rate just from using SourceDay right off the bat. Now, what happens if they need to make a change? Clint said, hey, orders change 52% of the time. Well, suppliers can put that in directly into SourceDay and pass that over to your team to review. So that means your team has all the power in saying, this works for me, it doesn't work for me, or yes, I want to update that purchase order, I don't. They can confirm it, and at that stage, that's when we would update ERP. So we only send good information back that's been approved and accepted by your buyers. Anything that continues to be negotiated or continues to go through this proposal loop back and forth with you and your suppliers doesn't reach the ERP until both parties agree. So you can continue to negotiate on their proposals. You can also reject it if you need to. Or as Clint mentioned, if MRP says, hey, we have an idea, we might want to move this PO out or cancel this PO out altogether because we don't need that stock anymore and we don't want it to become dead stock. Well, great, we can pull those in. Your buyers can review those within SourceDay, and then ultimately we can propose it across to the supplier to see if they'll accept or not. Now, this could also be one-offs. It doesn't have to come from MRP necessarily. It's just one of the options buyers have to propose changes to the suppliers. Now, same rule applies. Suppliers still have to accept that before we write it back to the ERP. Again, the purpose here is to highlight that we are only sending good data back because upstream, that impacts how MRP, how APS runs, and how it's feeding off good data. And then downstream, what about receiving? What about AP? We want to make sure their processes are smooth and easy as well, and that we have a good three-way match. So this is how we can ensure that's taking place and de-risk that order by managing those changes effectively. And speaking of de-risking, we can also remind the suppliers as we're approaching the due date. So this could be 2 weeks for domestic suppliers, could be 3 months for international, whatever you want to set that as. We can automatically remind suppliers and ask them to reconfirm this order. So basically a second acknowledgement as we're approaching the due date in order to say, yeah, we're still good. No changes necessary. We're going to deliver on time. And again, that same customer who saw that huge spike in their acknowledgement rate also saw a big spike up to 89% on their on-time delivery just by turning on SourceDay. So this is a great way to make sure that we're gently tapping those suppliers on the shoulder, say, hey, are we still good? To make sure we get our deliveries when we need them to keep our production line running. And then last, having visibility into what the supplier has shipped and being able to reference that when needed. That's going to also clear up a lot of information for your team and help you just stock the warehouse with the proper people, right? So if we have a bunch of orders coming in one day, we may want to increase staff. If we're going to have a pretty low week, well, maybe we don't need as many people to show up for that shift. So that helps us plan and really make the most of our people and all of our resources. So now you've seen basically the back and forth of all this information from ERP to SourceDay and how we get it back in. But how do the suppliers actually take action? Well, they have options. So they got 3 different things that they can do. One is the platform. You'll see here in the middle. This is our bread and butter. This is where SourceDay grew up. We initially started here where suppliers were logging in. They were able to see all of their customers under one roof that are using SourceDay, and they can take bulk actions like imports and exports. They can work in bulk in the UI across multiple POs from multiple customers. They can even work off of a checklist just to make things easier and cleaner and more structured for them. But what we found is, hey, we're only capturing 70 to 80% of your total supplier base, the ones who wanted to use a platform, ones who wanted to utilize that technology. So what we found is that we had some tail end suppliers, ones who were tech resistant. They didn't want to log in. They didn't want to have to remember a password. Or maybe your customers or you're only sending your suppliers 1 to 2 orders a month or 1 to 2 orders a year. Well, they don't need to log into a platform for that. So we want to make a frictionless, easy way for those suppliers to interact, which is through their email. That's how they're doing it today. So we just put a link on that email. They're able to drill into SourceDay with no login required, take their actions, give acknowledgments, updates, shipment information, and then move on with life. So it makes it really easy for them. They don't have to really add any extra steps. It's just how they're doing it today, but better. And then for those larger suppliers who don't want to even read your emails or open up and log into a platform, well, great. We can be EDI compliant for you. So that way we can send over those EDIs whenever you create any POs. And then if they send back acknowledgments and updates, we can consume that and make it easy for your buying team to read that all in one place. So they have one workflow. No matter how suppliers are sending them information, they go to one place within SourceDay, and they don't even have to care how that supplier gave them that information. It's all just going to display in the same way. So it makes it easier for buyers to manage multiple customers across different, stages of their tech journeys, making it easier and more efficient for those buyers to manage orders and get things in on time. So those are the 2 slides I promised. I'm not going to go any more onto any of those, but what I'm going to do is basically walk you through what this email workflow looks like for the suppliers. And then we'll chase that back over to the buyer side of SourceDay, highlight how they can manage all of their open orders, use SourceDay intelligence to reduce risk. And then we'll see additionally how we can pull in information from MRP APS to send over to the suppliers and round out with some scorecards and KPIs. So first and foremost, when you create a new order, SourceDay picks it up and they communicate it across. This is an example of what that email would look like for those suppliers who just want to work out of their emails only. So they'd be notified, hey, here's a new order line that has been added to this PO. We need you to go in and accept it. And we even just give them a quick blurb as to what they need to do. So they can review this high level information here on the email itself and then drill into SourceDay with a single click. So again, no login required, nothing fancy, nothing special. They literally just click a link on their email, and then they're able to view all of the details from that purchase order, such as the notes, any additional attachments, and then they can take action. So not only are they getting access to all and better information than just reviewing a PDF, but now they can come in and interact with it. So they can edit these dates, they can update the quantity, the cost as needed, and they can give reason why they may be making that proposed change. And then ultimately the goal would be for them to send that information back to you. With a single click, that's now pushed back over to the buyer side of SourceDay, letting them know, hey, here's your acknowledgement, or here's some proposed changes from this supplier. One of the things our suppliers also really love about this is that they can export this information out. So typically today, suppliers are getting your PDFs. They're having someone on their end manually key those into their ERP or into a big spreadsheet so they can manage it on that side. Well, we want to make that easier for them and reduce that human error. So now they can export this information by PO and then upload it into their own ERP. So that reduces that human error, which again, we're ultimately trying to drive to getting you your stuff on time and in full. So that helps clean up that process and make sure there's no hiccups. Now, once the supplier's taking this action, they're done, right? They've given us our information. They can go back to fulfilling orders and getting us our stuff on time. So if we want to chase this information back over, we can now see what this looks like for your team on the buyer side of SourceDay. So that supplier's taken their actions, they've given us updates, they may have just given us a straight up acknowledgement. Well, you're going to be able to see all of that purchase order lifecycle within SourceDay from your end. First and foremost, we're here on the pending tab, and this is where any new orders exist that are waiting on that initial acknowledgement. And just to give you a quick lay of the land here, you're looking at all your suppliers across all POs and down to that line level. So we want to make sure that you're able to get really granular with the way you manage your purchase orders, because each individual line is its own little contract. So we want to treat it as such. So we have them confirm each and every line on the POs to make sure that price, quantity, and date is accurate. And again, you get what you asked for. One of the first places, as I mentioned on that slide, where we can inject a bunch of time back into buyers' days is just being able to automatically follow up on these orders that are awaiting acknowledgement, as well as any other order and any other status. But really keying in here on the first part of this step is saying, hey, we need you to just come in and give us acknowledgement that you've received this order. You can make these dates, prices, and quantities work. I usually tell people when I was a buyer in a previous life, this was something that took me 2 hours every day. I have to pull multiple reports down, have to go and find, and then open the vendor record, find their phone number, give them a call, try to figure out where they're at with my orders. Or I would download a big open order report, put it in a spreadsheet and send it out and ask them to acknowledge all these orders. That was cumbersome. It never came back clean, or somebody's on vacation and they couldn't acknowledge my order. So being able to not have to chase down every single order and have automation take over would have really freed up a ton of time every day of my day. Now you're always going to have access to the different lifecycle points within SourceDay as well. So anything that's moving freely, going through its process and no issues, you're gonna be able to track and process anything that's shipped and on its way to you, as well as anything that's open at any time. You're always gonna have access to all of these different orders. But what we also want to do is highlight where your buyers need to pay attention to orders. Where are those needles in the haystack, that could be causing us some issues. So we're going to look at all risks as well as anywhere where SourceDay is pulling out some AI and ML to show you that there's potential snakes in the weeds. So what that ultimately looks like is within all risks, we can now see where suppliers have proposed changes. And by drilling into that, we'll get a nice little pop-up window saying, hey, here's all the proposed changes these suppliers are trying to make on these orders. You can see they're updating the price, quantity, and date. And SourceDay Intelligence is telling us, hey, we should probably go in and review and accept this. So it makes it easy for me as a buyer to just click right on that, review it. And if I click accept, we update ERP, adjust that PO, and notify the supplier of that acceptance. And that's all pretty normal. That's probably stuff you're used to seeing from SourceDay. But what we're doing now as well is allowing you to use SourceDay Intelligence so you can narrow down these risks. And what I mean by that is now we can use our predictive analytics to say, all right, we got this lead time risk and we got acknowledgement risks. What do those ultimately mean for your buyers? Well, what I'm doing here is sorting and filtering this down so I can isolate those specific different types of risks from SourceDay so I can focus in on them. And then if I drill into these, I can see that lead time analysis is telling me, hey, you got a really aggressive lead time on this order. It's probably not going to happen. Based on historical delivery from this supplier, it's not going to hit this window. So what we're suggesting is that you reach out and message this supplier. Say, hey, you acknowledge this order, which is great, and you acknowledge this date, which is great, but can you actually make that work? So we'll create the message for your buyers so they don't even have to waste time typing out messages. We'll just go ahead and auto-populate this based on the risk itself. And your buyers can then edit and make it their own from there and then send this off to the supplier. That way we can reach out and say, hey, we have a really aggressive lead time. You said you could make it. Can you actually make this? They may already have a truck on the way, or they may already be delivering something else. So they're able to expedite that. And we just don't know. But we want to make sure that you have confirmation on that and you're working with good data. Same thing can be said for the missing acknowledgement. So if we see that, hey, a supplier typically will acknowledge within a certain time frame, but we've exceeded that, we want to alert you to that because that could be an issue. This could be some turnover on the supplier side. Maybe their customer service rep is taking another job and they forgot to tell you. Maybe they're out on vacation for 2 weeks. Maybe something's going on here. But we want to highlight that for you so that way you can also send a message on these, reach out and contact those suppliers in order to make sure that, again, you get what you need when you need it. Now, ultimately, this view is really powerful. So as a buyer, I may want to save it. So I could just save this view, make it my own, say, hey, this is everything that SourceDay is telling me are my predictive risks to get out ahead of things, as well as I can give it a quick description. This is important because when I save it, now I'll have access to this view in my views anytime I want. So every time I log into SourceDay, I'll be able to jump right back into those predictive risks, see the things I care about most as a buyer, whether SourceDay is highlighting it for me or not off the bat, and then I can take it from there. We really want to narrow the focus, make it easier for you to see where those issues may exist so you can address them faster, get to those big ticket items quickly, and then move on throughout the day to more strategic activities like finding a new supplier or finding new products that could save your company money. And the last one to quickly note here is you also see email issue. So this is one that we want to try to highlight for our buyers, that there may be an issue with an email delivery. So maybe something bounced. Maybe we got an out of office message from a supplier. Well, we want you to be alerted to that so you know how to properly address it. Again, this could be turnover at the supplier or they're just on vacation, but we want to highlight that for you so you can address it at the source and then move on. So that makes, again, life easier. You have visibility into your emails actually arriving at their destination. So if there is any other issues like acknowledgement updates, well, now we know why. We can reach out to someone else and try to get that resolved. So those are the main ways that SourceDay is helping us out with the SourceDay intelligence, highlighting any proposed changes and what we should do, managing those missing acknowledgements, helping out with aggressive lead times or lead times that don't really add up, and then making sure our emails get delivered. So that way, again, we can trust everything at the end of the day to get to that on-time delivery and in full. Now that's how we manage risks and things all incoming from the supplier. But what about things where we want to send messages out to our suppliers or ask them for updates? Well, Clint highlighted the exceptions earlier, but this is where we're going to be pulling information from MRP APS. So you'll be able to see those messages directly from your ERP, where it's suggesting, hey, we need to move this out, move it in, maybe even cancel it. And as a previous buyer, this is the one that alarms me the most. That's a lot of dead stock that I'm putting on the warehouse shelf. So for me, what I would do is highlight those cancellations and then start to review and ask the suppliers if we can go ahead and cancel these orders. What that means is I get to pick and choose if I want to request this change, and I can add any additional notes. Or if I see one and it's a critical spare or an item that I definitely am going to need at some point, but anyways, MRP and APS aren't really aware of that, well, I can just go ahead and ignore that exception. I don't want to see it anymore. I don't want it to clutter up my dashboard here. So I'm going to tuck that one away and tell the SourceDay, hey, I don't want to see this one anymore until a new message appears on this line. So if a new message appears, we'll display the new one, but we're always going to continue to ignore this one if we select that. Again, making buyers focus more narrow, helping them look for the things that are actually important. And at the end of the day, in this example, seeing that we could reduce our dead stock by $4 million, thus saving our company a ton of money in inventory and carrying costs. Now, we've worked through a lot. We talked about acknowledgements, we talked about updates, we've managed a lot of different things with our suppliers through the course of this demonstration, but ultimately we need them to ship it to us and get it to us on time. So we want to give our users visibility into this, which means when a supplier ships, we'll ask them for information and generate an ASN. So if they put a bunch of different order lines from different purchase orders into one box, that's totally fine. We're going to group those into an ASN for you. And then we can ask the supplier to give us additional information on that shipment, like the carrier, the means of transport, and even that tracking number. And if they're using one of the 1,100 different carriers that we have for that tracking, we can give you live and up-to-date information from that carrier directly. That means you know exactly when that's going to hit your warehouse. You can track it on its way to you like an Amazon order. Ultimately, giving you more and better visibility into these shipments so you know when things should arrive. And if a customer calls or if production's trying to figure out when that part's going to arrive, you can give them a quick and accurate answer. Now, once this is received in, everything will fall off of this list. And we come to the point where, hey, we want to know how our suppliers are performing. We've worked through acknowledgements, updates, back and forth communications. So what ultimately do we do with all that information? Well, we give it back to you. So we want you to be able to see how your suppliers are performing overall across the board, but also individually. Each and every supplier that you'll be interacting with in SourceDay will be graded and graded against your criteria. So you tell us what makes A, B, C, D, which of these buckets is most important. And then we give you this information back for you to use in building that relationship with the suppliers. I always had to go off just a hope and a prayer on this. I would say, hey, I don't think you're responding fast enough. And they would say, well, how fast am I responding? Well, I don't actually know. I just don't think you're doing it fast enough. I didn't have any data to back it up. So now I can use our scorecard and maybe break this down for a quarter and start doing some QBRs with my vendors, seeing where we can improve and where they can improve so we can both benefit from getting the things that we need and on time. And then lastly, not only are we grading the suppliers this way, and this can feel very zoomed in on an individual supplier, but we also have our overall SourceDay insights. And this is a really zoomed out company-wide view of very similar information. So talked a lot today about on time and in full delivery. So we're showing you and how you can measure that as well from your purchase orders. And this can be broken down and filtered even further by suppliers or groups of suppliers. So you can sort and filter this as you need. Additionally, if your prices are changing on your purchase orders, you also be able to see that price point variance. And most folks are saying, hey, how often are those prices going up? And how much is that impact to my bank account? Those are the things I want to key in on. Well, great, you can focus on those as well. We can show and highlight for you where a supplier may be increasing rates, whereas another one that you can also buy that product from is maintaining or decreasing. So that way you can move quantity purchases around appropriately. And then the bottom two really are going to be focused in on your dates. How often are things being moved in and out? Ultimately, as well, what are our lead times for this? And are we hitting those expectations? So the lead times is showing you, here's my delivery locations across the world. And if it's big, angry, and orange, that means you're exceeding those lead times. So you'd be able to drill into this report, highlight by location, by item, by vendor, and say, okay, where are we missing? What's going on with this specific item and vendor that we need to figure out in order to improve our lead times or maybe adjust something within the ERP to make it more realistic. So throughout all of SourceDay Intelligence and throughout our insights here, we're really trying to make it easier for you to identify the root cause of issues within the supply chain so you can address them there and make sure at the end of the day, everything's running smoothly and you get to your end customer on time. Now, Clint, I know I ran through that fairly quickly, wanted to leave some time here at the end for Q&A, but anything else you wanted me to cover before we jump into that Q&A?
No, I think that's good, and I figured out my camera too. So
there we go.
Yeah, sorry about that. Hopefully that didn't affect anyone out there. No, I think that's good. Wendy, do you know if there's any questions out there?
Hi, yes, we do have a couple of questions. Clint and Michael, that was great. Thank you so much. One question that is being asked is, what's the cost for suppliers to use SourceDay?
Yeah, good question. The cost for suppliers is there's no cost, so it's zero cost to the supplier. Now, when you think about that, I just want to hit that a little bit more detail. So there's obviously, when you think about the USC and Unified Supplier Collaboration, which is what Michael went through in that one slide, whether it's an email user or whether it's a portal user or EDI user. When suppliers are using email and they're logging into the SourceDay portal, there's no cost to them. If they're an EDI user, then their typical EDI costs would be, of course, be at play. So, it just depends on what they want to do there. But the other thing I'll just point out is with all the suppliers, if they need training or support or help, like, if a supplier is a portal user and they can't log in because they lost their password, the good news is that supplier is not going to come to you as the customer. They're going to come to SourceDay. So SourceDay will help them get back into the platform, reset their password and all that. So we take a lot of that support lift off of you, which is one of the main key things that SourceDay does in this world of supplier portals. Thanks, Wendy.
Perfect. Thank you. Have a couple more questions. One is a two-part question. What is the typical timeline to implement SourceDay from engagement to finish? Understanding it does depend on each business requirement, as all are unique. And then the second part of that is, how much time does it take for suppliers to start the SourceDay platform adoption and use?
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah. On average, we like to say 9 to 12 weeks. Typically we're right closer to that 9-week time frame. And we like to go quick. So if your team likes to go quick, just let us know. We can move faster than that. But we have an overall implementation timeline that just basically goes over, hey, from start of project to finish of project, what's required of each team, who's going to be delivering what. But typically we quote that right around 9 weeks. And then as far as for the suppliers, we have a whole team dedicated to supplier success and supplier onboarding. And their approach is, man, we hit them hard in the first 90 to 120 days. And that's really just getting them to that initial stage of using the email. And we'll work with y'all to identify the folks who would best benefit from logging into the platform to help them log in, make sure that they're in there, giving acknowledgments, giving updates. And that really leads to a lot of longevity and success for those suppliers if they're new to SourceDay. So by hitting them quick and early, we can at least get them on the emails. And then from there, we'll also encourage them, hey, here's everything behind the login. That's free for you to use, like Clint mentioned. Here's some extra functionality. So we can encourage them to grow with SourceDay organically into that login and taking more advantage from the platform, not just using the email.
Yeah, and I'll just piggyback on that. One thing to just think about, we really don't use the word too much like supplier onboarding around here. I know Michael just used it, but that's okay. We really think of this as more of a supplier network, and we're meeting the suppliers where they're at. So if they're email suppliers, they're email. If they want to log into a portal, they can. If they want to EDI, they can. But when you look at in terms of the supplier relationships, there's not like there's going to be a finite time where it's like, okay, you're officially live, all your suppliers are live, you're ready to go. We're always going to be working with you with your supplier base, because you're probably going to have 85% of your suppliers that you're going to use over and over and over again. But every year our customers are bringing on new suppliers, people leave, people get promoted. So there's always supplier engagement going on, which is why we have a supplier engagement team helping you with that. So it's something that we'll be a part of with you as a part of this partnership.
Great, very thorough answers. Thank you. One more question is, does SourceDay support both cloud and on-prem? And also, what versions of SyteLine or CloudSuite Industrial does SourceDay support?
Yeah, so we support both on-prem and cloud. And Clint, it's version 9 and up, I believe. Is that correct? Don't keep me honest on that.
We can do 8. We can do 8.
Okay. Yeah. So 8 and up is what we can support as far as SyteLine.
Okay, yeah, and we've got customers that are running both. I mean, today we probably have 150 plus, Infor customers. The vast majority of those are SyteLine customers. So we've supported lots of versions of on-prem. We have lots of customers in the cloud that we support as well.
So what you're saying is it wouldn't be your first rodeo.
Wouldn't be our first rodeo. No, we've been in that thing for a while.
All right. We do have one more. You touched a little bit, Michael, you mentioned MRP and APS. It sounds like SourceDay does support MRP and APS. Can you speak a little more about that?
Yeah, and I covered it in a couple of areas, so I'll just put it in a nutshell real quick, is basically managing those updates all 52% of the time when orders are going to change. We're keeping that information clean and back into ERP. So what that means is the upstream effect is when your MRP runs, it's running off good and quality PO data. There's nothing in there cluttering it up. There's nothing in there that can confuse it because we're getting inaccurate information. And then when it runs, if it gives you those exception messages like move-ins, move-outs, cancellations, we'll be able to pull those in and make them more actionable. So it's not just a long list of all these things that you then have to go and manually take action on. Now it'll be at your fingertips at a click of a button to send those out directly to your suppliers and request those proposed changes, thus making it more impactful and actually driving the supply chain.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that as a former user of SyteLine, and I mentioned earlier in my presentation, we did run exceptions. It was a beast, to say it nicely. For those of you who are running MRP and APS, one of the most critical pieces to this is like the educational side of this, is you have to have good data. And if your data is not clean in your purchase orders, your due dates are not right, your quantities are not right, because you and the supplier are not on the same page, you're going to have impacts with how your MRP and your APS is running and planning and recommending. And so once you get that data cleaned up, because many of you might not want to run exceptions because you're fear that the data is bad. But once you start to get the data cleaned up with SourceDay, then you can rely on what the exception report is telling you is closer to what's actually the truth. And now you can take those exception messages, consume them, bring them back into the platform through our application, and get those to your suppliers where there can be action taken. Because trust me, you do want to work on your exception messages. You probably have, if you're not doing anything, you might have exception messages right now that's telling you to cancel specific purchase orders that you don't have any demand for. So getting your hands around that is very, very important to the health of your business.
Gosh, you guys are good. Very thorough answers. Thank you. So this is just a question for you kind of to answer for the general audience. If any of our guests want to proceed, with SourceDay, learn more, is there the opportunity to potentially get a more personalized demo? Should they reach out to Molly, reach out to you? What does that look like?
Well, that's a great question, and I don't even know why I didn't, talk more about this. But the good news is today we are officially Infor partners. We've been pursuing the Infor partnership for a very, very long time, and as of this year, we are officially in partnership with Infor. So yes, the correct step would be to actually go to Molly, because Molly would work with us, of course, but she's your sales rep, and she's the one that you would initiate the engagement with if you're interested in seeing a demo and exploring SourceDay for your company.
Perfect. We will just give a few more, maybe a couple moments here to see if anyone else has any other questions they want to drop in the chat. I don't see anything else coming in. So
Okay.
as Clint said, if anyone has, more questions, wants to explore SourceDay further, reach out to Molly Burgess. She will gladly help you. And Clint, Michael, thank you so much for your time today. Everyone
Yeah.
here, thank you for attending. And we appreciate all of your time and effort.
Thank you to Guide and Molly and Wendy and everyone else. Thank you very much. Appreciate everybody's time today.
Right, bye, everyone.